everyone, and welcome back to my channel. My name is Vanissia. This is the Woolly Worker Knitting Podcast, and today I am joining you for episode 25 of the Woolly Worker Knitting Podcast. I'm really happy to be filming today, as always. Sometimes it takes a little bit of motivation to turn on the camera and film, but every time I feel so happy about showing my works in progress and finished items and updating you on things. It really is part of my routine now to film the podcast, and I love it. So I hope you're excited as well. I hope you have something to work on while you watch this video. I'll try and keep the intro brief, and I'll try to keep this episode a bit relaxed, a bit lower effort, or like less maintenance, and try and just have a chat with friends. Let's see how that goes. But yeah, if you want to find me on social media, you can find me on Ravelry, on Instagram, at The Woolly Worker, same as here on YouTube. You can find me on Ko-fi, and you can support me here for the price of a cup of coffee if you like what I do, or you can also gift me something from my Ravelry wishlist or join the Discord. And all of these links and everything are down below if you're interested. Every important information will be down in the description below as well if you have any questions about any of the patterns, products I mentioned. So I think that's pretty much for the admin. Today we have 2 finished items, which is actually quite funny because last episode I had 12 finished items, but I skipped 2 of them because they were blocking and drying, and in the end those 2 items are the only 2 things that are finished. So I haven't actually finished anything since the last episode, but I have quite a lot of new cast-ons and things that you haven't seen before. So today should be very exciting and new, and I've been really enjoying my project lately. I feel like I've picked really good things to work on and stopping myself from casting on too much. So a lot of progress has been made on the things I've been working on. So without further ado, let's get into it. I'll start with what I am wearing, which is my first finished object, and it is the Levi pullover by Sari Nordland, or Levi, it depends on how you pronounce it, I guess. This is a colourwork circular yoke sweater in worsted weight. The recommended yarn was Istex Let Lopi, if I remember correctly, and I made mine in Filclana Peruvian Highland wool. Now, before anybody compliments me on the color scheme, I cannot take credit for it. I completely copied the colors that Florence from Handmade by Florence used in her testnet of this from a couple of years ago. I was so inspired by it that I just could only see this sweater as a low contrast version, and I really like this neutral yet interesting color palette. I really fell in love with this color here, the dark grey / brown, called Limpopo, but more on that later. The sweater itself, I'm happy with it. It is really warm. I might need to take this off by the end of the podcast. I'll be showing photos. We haven't taken them yet, but I hope that we get a chance to. So I'll be sharing photos on the screen, but obviously you can see the very impressive looking color work. There's some color work on the sleeves and some color work here on the bottom. There was supposed to be some color work at the elbows, but I simply skipped that. There's a very big chunky neck. It's not a turtleneck, it's definitely chunkier than your usual double folded collars. I think if it had been a tad longer, I would have been annoyed by it, but I think this is hitting a good point where I'm obviously very covered and very protected from the elements. No need to wear a scarf if I was to wear this out. But it's not bothering me, and the yarn is soft enough that I can tolerate this next to my neck. I really wouldn't have been able to if it was in Let Lopi. So if you want to make this sweater, just make sure that you are tolerant to the yarn that you use for the color, or you could do the trick where, because it's double folded, the part on the inside, you could be using a softer yarn and then it wouldn't be visible from the outside. So a little trick there for you. I'm quite happy with the length of the sleeves. I had to adjust a little bit. I think I shortened them by a few centimeters. I also cropped the body a little bit, and I feel like I could have cropped it even more. It's hitting a weird point when I'm sitting down where it's kind of like flaring on my legs. Maybe if I had done a split hem that wouldn't have happened, but when I'm standing up it's a good length. The gauge of my sweaters is a mystery when I use color work because I'm a loose knitter. I'm a very loose color work knitter. If anything, I'm kind of tempted to try going down a needle size for color work next time. Usually I just stay in the same needle size, but my gauge is tighter in stockinette. This time for the color work I didn't catch floats the normal way. I used leatherback jacquard, and I talked about this in the previous episodes where this was a whip only, but I even showed you the floats, I think. So if you're interested in hearing more about that, definitely check out the episode, because I finished that yoke quite a while ago, I guess. And then there's also some decorative pearl stitches in the yoke that Sari designed, and there's some as well in the sleeve color work, but not at the bottom. And my color work is definitely neater at the bottom where there was no pearl round. I think having pearl rounds or pearl stitches really affected my knitting and made it less neat. I was worried about how this looked before block. I had also blocked the yoke before doing the rest of the sweater, and so the entire time I was working on the body there was a very obvious blocking line, but this has disappeared and this sits nicely. The yoke depth I'm happy with. Maybe I could have been a tiny bit shorter, but I used my loom pullover as a template because I was comfortable with that circular yoke, so I think all things considered it's not a bad fit. I guess I just prefer other constructions such as saddle shoulders and drop shoulders. Raglans and circular yokes I'm really liking less and less, but this is wearable and comfortable, and if I put my hands up the sweater doesn't come up too high. It doesn't expose my skin or anything, so it will definitely be a practical knit. Let's readjust now. The other thing to mention is that there is only one set of short rows in this sweater, and it is at the underarm. I think it's after the split. I think I prefer the loom pullover because that one had also some short rows at the hem, which lowered the hem, and I prefer that, and I think I will do that in future circular yoke sweaters, and even just, yeah, I want to keep doing lowering the hem. I think I prefer that. So because there's only one set of short rows there and there's no short rows here, it almost feels like it is coming up too high at the top, but it's actually fine. It does feel like a different fit than other shaped sweaters, but there is some shaping in it, so I much prefer that. At this point I don't think I'm gonna choose patterns that don't include any shapings whatsoever, because it just seems like that's a recipe for having something that's just like slightly always a bit off. Another modification that I did is that I did all my ribbing details inside out, and I'm really happy with that. I think the way you can see it very nicely is at the neck, and I'll show close-ups actually, but I mimicked that for the sleeve ribbing and the body ribbing, and it is really, really neat. I am loving how this Filcolana Peruvian Highland wool is looking in the ribbing inside out. And I didn't do set up rounds for the tubular bind off, I went straight and did the sewn bind off, and it looks fine from the wrong side. In case you were wondering, I'll also try and include a detailed photo of that. Overall, like I said, the fit I would rate like a 7 out of 10, and then the color work, it maybe looks fine from far away. We'll see in the photos later. I would also rate my color work here for like a 7 out of 10. So overall this sweater, it's not the favorite thing I've ever made. It's also not a flop, far from it. It's really warm, so I don't think I'll be having a lot of wear this season because it is already starting to get a little warmer, and maybe if I'm going on a walk outside this would be good, although I don't feel like Filcolana is that breathable, or like the Peruvian Highland wool. I feel like I would get sweaty in this quite quickly, so maybe not for a walk, but just if I'm like outside on the bench and not moving, that would be quite nice. And obviously it's dense enough that it would be windproof because of all the floats and also my dense knitting for the stockinette. Total cost of this jumper was £34.78. I don't think I bought the yarn on sale, but I bought it a while ago, so maybe they have increased now. But it didn't take too much of the contrasting colours, which is always a good thing. So yeah, overall I wouldn't necessarily recommend this jumper as your first ever colorwork sweater. There are no rows that are using 3 colors, but there are the pearl stitches, there are some long floats every now and then, and I guess there's the colorwork in the sleeve and the hem, which is, if your tension is not the best, could affect how this drapes and whether it cinches in or flares out, so just something to keep in mind. But it was a good experience knitting it. I'm glad I did. It was on my list for a while and I really like the colour, and I really hope that I wear this. I think that I will, and I'm excited to take some photos and really bask in the glory of this finished item. I think that's it for this one. Let's move on to the next item, which is a pair of socks. And the reason I started these socks, well, first things first, they're the Field of Sunflower sock set by Stone Knit. There's 2 patterns included in this purchase, and I did the second one. So the reason I did that was because I'm part of a Ravelry group that is about sock knitting and challenges, and every 2 months, or every month there's a new challenge, and it lasts for 2 months. So the January/February challenge was to do some socks that the theme of it was flora and fauna. And it wasn't necessarily color work. For example, you could have some floral motifs that were reminiscent of flowers or vegetation. I just knew that in my favorites, I had to look at what sock patterns I was into. And I knew that I had a lot of like animals, color work socks, but I also had yarn in stash already for these ones, and I really wanted to try this yarn actually. So yeah, I made these with the yarn I had, and here are the socks. I think I showed a photo in the last episode, so you will already have seen this, but we have a whole pair, and they're quite matchy. So I used John Arbon Exmoor sock 4-ply, Exmoor sock yarn, I think is what it's called, in all of the colors. There's Mackerel Sky, Mizzle, Aggie, and Drumble are the 4 colors, and then for the brown I just used like a tiny little bit of Drops Fable, and I actually used duplicate stitch to do this, as opposed to knitting knitting the rounds with 3 colors. I didn't want to do that. I'll show some close-ups. So I don't know if you can see from this far away or also from the photos, but I'm not the most impressed with my color work tension once again. Maybe the yarn isn't helping, and also my magic loop line definitely affects color work a lot. So these blocked out already and it got nicer, so this was even worse before. I with a bit of trial and error, I figured out the right recipe for me for Charlotte Stone's patterns. She has a few tips on how to get the color work to work, so either changing the needle size or changing the stitch count, etc. So I definitely had to learn what worked for me, and for me what worked is to do the stitch counts for size 2 for everything except color work, and then do the color work charts of size 1, but go up a needle size. So this is what I do, but obviously your mileage might vary. There's a bit of 2x2 ribbing. The socks, it's a normal heel flap and gusset in a contrasting color. I really like this blue. I'm not sure about the grey main color. I think it looks a bit dirty. I wish maybe I had used a cream or a white. I don't know if the grey is that striking. I like the contrast of the flowers on top though, they're definitely visible. I'm happy I finished the socks in time for the challenge, and it was motivating to have that, because this was kind of an impulse cast on. I hadn't planned on making these this year necessarily. And then a little toe. Yeah, it wasn't too hard to motivate myself to make the second one. Yeah, there's 5 flowers for the chart of size 1, and in size 2 there's 6 flowers. So I think if I had made the color work for size 2, it maybe would have looked nicer because it would have been symmetrical. And this has happened before when I made the chicken color work socks. The chart I followed had an uneven amount of chickens, and I wish that it was symmetrical. But yeah, they fit. The yarn I want to talk about, so this is John Arbon Exmoor sock yarn. I'll get a skein up. This is another color that I have, I bought in London. This is the color, Quick Beam, I think, but it's getting faded. So this sock yarn is 50 gram, 200 meters, so it's not that much, and you probably have to buy a lot, and it's not the cheapest either. Made in the UK, 60% Exmoor Blueface, 20% Cordale, 10% Zorbal, and 10% nylon, and it is also superwash, which didn't necessarily come to me, like, it wasn't obvious because I felt like it felt quite like a natural sock yarn, but it has been superwash treated. So I thought that this was going to behave the same way as the Jamisons of Shetland Spindrift, like 4-ply, which is so catchy, so good for color work. Like, this yarn just holds on to itself and doesn't let go. And this is really good for color work, and I love my color work in this yarn. So I thought that the Exmoor would be like that. But first of all, if I'm not mistaken, it's a single ply. Well, actually, no, I am wrong. It is 2-ply, but it's so loosely twisted that when you're knitting with it, first of all, it has a tendency, it seems unbalanced. If I understand spinning correctly, it kind of twists in on itself. it doesn't catch itself. Maybe that's the superwash treatment as well. But yeah, I wasn't impressed and I was a bit disappointed. I'll see how it holds as well. I'm curious about the wear and tear on that. I guess my hopes were just really high up for a nice colourwork sock yarn, because working colourwork in superwash yarns is just never a good story for me. I do like the colour selection that they have. I've spoken about this before and how they have a small-ish selection, but all the colours look so great with one another. Like, even this would have been nice in this. Like, look at that blue and that orange. That's so stunning. And I have quite a few colours of that, and I have a lot of plans for future colourwork socks. I will use the yarn I have. I might not buy it again, especially because there's so many different choices out there. I want to keep experimenting. But yeah, I mean, I'm really happy with the colourwork section, like here, that looks really flat and nice, but I'm really unhappy with how my joints look. I mean, like, this is really not nice. When it's on my ankles, it's fine. I'm just a little disappointed. I used just under half a skein of grey, the main colour, and then a little bit of the other ones. And so again, altogether these cost £10.26. One skein, for reference, nowadays is about £9 or £10. So I basically used like 50 grams of yarn, but you obviously have to get different colours. I would recommend this pattern for scraps. The pattern was really well written, really nothing bad to say about it. The other pattern in the sock set has colourwork all the way down in the foot, and I find this to be more challenging. You definitely have to get your tension right, because otherwise they'll become way too tight or way too loose, and also it's more effortful to just keep on doing colourwork. This was a welcome break of just plain stockinette knitting. So yeah, overall, I'm happy I have them. I really love colourwork socks. I love having them. I do not like making them. And I've yet to find a colourwork sock yarn that I would be happy with. But I'm glad I gave this a go, because I had this yarn in stash for over a year, and yeah, I'll not give up on it. And I know my knitting is not the neatest at the colourwork join. That's okay. I'll keep practicing and try and get better. So those were my finished items. I'm happy with them, and I haven't finished a thing in a while, so I've been enjoying my projects, trying to make some progress on them and trying to finish something. Okay, let's talk about the whip that's been, I guess, on the needles for the longest? No, that's not actually true. So this is the Urania cardigan by Sari Nordland. I'm making this in Camarose Midnight Sol in Midnight Blue, with Knitting for Olive Merino in Blue Tit. And here's the colours together. They're really, really nice. I'm super chuffed with my choice. And then the cardigan is an interesting construction. At first I thought it was going to be a drop shoulder, but it's not. I don't know what the name of it is. I think that the Cal cardigan by Perfectly Knotted is the same construction, but I'll explain that in a second. I will just show you what this looks like first. Oh, I know that there's yarn attached as well, so I hope this doesn't fall off. So I've done the back panel, and I've joined the two fronts. I've joined the fronts at the underarm, and then I've not picked up for a sleeve. So this is what I have now. I probably won't hold this up too long because it's a bit of a mess. But I'll show you some photos, I guess, or maybe like a B-roll. So what I really like about this jumper is obviously the front cable. So we've got a lovely cable going down at the front, and if you notice as well, what's interesting is that it's mirrored. So the only way that it can be mirrored on the left and the right is if something happens at the back, otherwise it would follow the same direction all around. And so when you start this cardigan, you start at the cable actually, then you go back and you pick up stitches from the first end of that cable and you twist them in the other direction. So you're kind of starting at the middle and then you're going off in both directions. And then you start doing a lot of increases. There's a lot of shaping happening at the beginning. It was not too hard, but it required a lot of attention. You do a lot of increasing, and then you work on the front right, then on the back, and then on the front left, and then you go around and you join everybody, and then you're just going down for the body until you reach a length that you're happy with. Then there's some ribbing, and then you do the sleeves and you do some ribbing, and then at the very end there's a folded over button band that I'll show a pattern photo of, but I am really tempted to follow Tori's modification on Instagram. I'll also show a photo. She just picked up the stitches around and did an I-cord, and I really want to do that. I think it looks nice as well and a bit less busy than with the folded over thing. Sorry, I'm a bit all over the place. That was a lot to manage. I enjoy the process. I was a bit bored of the knitting flat, so that's why I picked up a sleeve. The cable is really easy to do and it doesn't happen too often, so you can just put a stitch marker and then every X number of rows you remember you have to cable. That's how I keep track of the cables, by the way, because I find it a bit difficult to count the rounds when there's cables involved, so I put a stitch marker on a non-cabled stitch. I made a little mistake at some point where I missed a note from Sari that said, make sure that you end on a right side. And I finished all of mine on the wrong side because that was usually where I end things. And then afterwards you have to go around and join everything. But because I had finished one row early or one row late, then my cable wouldn't align anymore and it would be one row off. So I fixed it in a way that just meant I had more ends to weave in, but everything was fine. I think there was even one part in the pattern where there might be a stitch count that's wrong by like 1 or 2 stitches, but I just like kept what I had on the needles and everything worked fine. It was just about like body stitches. Apart from that, the pattern is super detailed, even though it was a new construction to me. And it's a pattern from a book where technically they have less room to explain things. I felt like there was no problem whatsoever and it was like just following a PDF pattern. Very well explained. The charts are at the end of the book, so there's a bit of flipping around to do. But thankfully for the charts for this one, they're so easily memorizable that I haven't flipped back to that page since the start, which is not the case for other patterns in the book, which are much more complicated cables. I'm happy with the color. I think I maybe would have liked... The fuzz of the midnight sole is quite intense. It looks so very fuzzy, and so the cables are quite obscured. Maybe next time this would look better in a rounder yarn to emphasize the cable, but I guess you know what you're getting into if you're mixing a second fluffy strand with cables. I am planning to crop this a little bit and wear it over a dress. We're going to a wedding in April. I have a blue navy dress and I really hope that these two work together. If not, I don't have time to plan another cardigan. So I'll just bring it with me anyway and hope that somebody comments on my nice cardigan. I think that's everything for this so far. I'm really happy to be knitting from the book and from this gifted yarn from Christmas presents. It's been a really joyful experience and interesting construction, like I said, which it scratches that itch of wanting something new. And I'm happy to be knitting the first cardigan of the year and hopefully the first of many. Okay, the next work in progress I've shown on Instagram stories, I think, and it is the Louder vest by the Crea Bea. It's a test knit. The test knit runs for quite a while, so I definitely have my time for this. So I'm knitting this in Filklana Peruvian Highland wool, which is actually the recommended yarn, or the yarn that Rebecca used in her sample, and I'm using the same color as my contrast color here. So this is Limpopo. My original plan was to use some yarn I had in stash, but I swatched and it wasn't really working, so I had to buy a vest quantity, which isn't actually that much money, and I really like the color. I think it'll be more interesting than something that's like a cream or a light grey, which was my original plan. So I've just today joined in the round. So this is what we've got so far. So you start at the back and you make the back panel, then you pick up on the left or the right, and then you knit straight for a while, then you start doing some increases for the v-neck, then you join for the v-neck, keep doing a bit of knitting to reach the armhole depth, join in the round, and then you join in the round for a while. Well, you knit in the round for a while until you reach the length that you want, and then pick up and do all the ribbing. So it's really straightforward. The obviously interesting thing about this is the cables. I don't know if you can see from this distance, but yeah, they are quite squished together. I know that this is going to massively expand if I wanted to, and I do want it to. I'm knitting size 2, which should give me around 7 centimeters of positive ease, which is what I wanted, as opposed to size 3, which would be very oversized. I have a few oversized vests and they're great, but I wanted to try something that was more fitted. I obviously love the cable details. Oh, the sun is maybe hiding this, but you can see at the shoulder there's a cable going there. And then the v-neck detail, which is stunning, and it's like a cable going all the way like this. I'll show you a photo just to make sure, but I've made a modification that Rebecca approved, which is I'm mirroring my 2/2 cables. So this is made with like 4 stitch cables and 6 stitch cables. I'm leaving the 6 stitches as is, but the 4 stitch cables, I'm mirroring them, so half of the vest I'm going to the left and then the other half to the right. And the main reason I wanted this was for the v-neck detail. I really thought it would look nicer if it was going in opposite directions. And then obviously if I made that commitment for that, I'd have to keep mirroring them all the way around. It took a bit of figuring things out at the start. I had to ask a friend for help just to confirm what I was thinking. And yeah, I would recommend that modification for you if you want. I put my notes on Ravelry if you're curious as to what I had to change, which wasn't much. The other thing I'm thinking of doing is maybe do some twisted rib. I'll see. Maybe it'll be too much for something that is so heavily cabled. Will it look like I'm trying too hard or there's too many features in the design? But I'm really happy with the color and the yarn. I really think it shows off the cables nicely. They're not hindered, they're not hidden, they're plump and 3D looking. I'm really looking forward to blocking this because I think I will need to get a bit more width and length. So I'm really going to stretch this bad boy. And the other thing to mention about this is that there was a bit of confusion in the test net for the v-neck vest around the depth of the v-neck. So for a lot of different sizes there's some underarm shaping to do. Not for my size. For size 2 you just go straight and then you cast on a large amount of stitches at the underarm to keep the pattern continuous. But there's no like slope or anything, which Rebecca says it is fine. And for some other sizes there is some underarm shaping that you've got to maybe do at the same time as the v-neck shaping, and so the instructions weren't that clear. Maybe there wasn't enough stitch counts or enough clarity around when steps were happening and where. Rebecca said it was something that seemed so easy when you were talking about it, but when you're actually writing it down, it can seem much more complicated than what it actually is. And I can totally understand and relate to that when something seems simple in your head, but then trying to explain it to someone is just a nightmare. So I know Rebecca will put a lot of effort into fixing that because it was something that a few people were getting stuck on. So that was interesting to be part of that aspect of a test net where we're definitely highlighting something that if we're getting tripped up by it, a lot of people when they buy the pattern later would get tripped up by it. So yeah, you're welcome, I guess. But I'm really enjoying this. It's not too demanding. It definitely doesn't require you to look at charts the entire time. The cables are very simple to remember. They're all happening at the same time as well, so it's not like you have to keep track of what round you are at all the time. They are quite frequent though. There's not that many rest rounds, so it is a bit labor intensive, but you can get into a rhythm of it. I'm having that added difficulty of remembering that they're mirrored, so I put a stitch marker at the center to make sure that once I pass that stitch marker I've got to like cross the cables the other direction. I really don't want to notice later on that I've got a mistake, and I think it would be funny if I realized now on the podcast that I did, but I didn't. So I'm going to put that down now. If you like the cable pattern but you don't like wearing vests, the pattern is going to come as a master pattern with sweater, cardigan and vest, round neck and v-neck for everyone. So there's definitely something for everybody's taste, and I would maybe recommend this as a pattern for people who've never done cables before. I think that would be completely fine, as long as you're comfortable with maybe constructing a vest or constructing a drop shoulder sweater. It's kind of the same principle where you cast on the back, pick up the front, join in the round. But yeah, really enjoyable pattern, and again, a good experience test knitting for Crea Bea. She has split the test knitting groups into like cardigan and sweater and vests, which is understandable because I understand there's a lot of test knitters. But I think that's it for the Louder vest, and even though the deadline is a month away, if I keep plodding along and get the body done, then it's pretty much over. I'll just have the ribbings to do. What I'll probably do is I'll wait to finish my ball of yarn. I've just joined a new one. Then when I finish that one, I'll do all the ribbings. So I'll probably be showing you that next time. The next project is a new cast on. It is the Nelly Fair Isle Cowl by Mary Wallen. I had spoken in the last episode I was going to cast on the Fetlar scarf, but somebody gifted me the Nelly cowl on Ravelry and I was really grateful. I really wanted to do that one and it really motivated me. And I had the yarn in stash, so I just had to swap out a few skeins from the Fetlar scarf palette to get the Nelly cowl. It's attached to 3 balls of yarn just now, so we'll hopefully not make any accidents or tangles if we can avoid it. It's a very simple pattern where you cast on. I actually did the modification. I cast on with a provisional cast on as recommended by a lot of people on Ravelry and my own experience doing my other Fair Isle cowls. So provisional cast on, Fair Isle knitting, all in the round. It's easy enough to do on a normal like neck size needle. You're not doing magic loop or anything. And then, yeah, I'll talk about the difficulty I had in a bit, but I'll show you this first. I've made quite a lot of progress. So this is what we've got so far. So this is the bottom where I started, and we're getting here at the top. This is on, it's a bit scrunched up because I took off the needles. But yeah, it looks really, really good. I'm doing this in the Jamieson's of Shetland Spinrift 4-ply, like I talked about. There's 10 colours, I think, and I'm using all of the recommended ones except burnt ochre. I'm using yellow ochre because that's what I had in stash. So, the modifications. So first of all, I'm using the recommended needles, actually, because I am not on gauge, but I would like this to come out a little bigger than the sample, just so that it matches my burra cowl, which I love the width and the length of. So I'm trying to basically emulate the burra cowl dimensions, but with this motif and these colors. The problem is that, let me get my notes on this. The problem is that on the burra cowl, so the burra cowl was 26 inches circumference. One repeat was 11 inches. So if I did 2 repeats, I would be at 22 inches, which is too small. And if I did 3, like the pattern recommends, I would be at 33 inches, which would be too big. And in the pattern photos, you can see there's quite a lot of room here, which I didn't like and didn't want. The reason I like my burra cowl so much is that it's so windproof and so cozy. And if I just like tilt my head down slightly, I'm in the cowl already. And if the cowl was all the way down there, that wouldn't happen anymore. So I knew I wanted to, again, get 26 inches, which means 13 inches for a half. So I had my repeat, which ended here after this yellow zigzag. I'll show a photo of where I was. And so I decided basically what I could do is add 2 inches of knitting and then repeat that whole thing over. So I was looking at the motif and was thinking, where can I borrow 2 inches while keeping a balance and in terms of color and busyness and like the width of the bands of the color work. Like this star motif is really big and then this little wave here is tiny. So I was trying to keep those things in mind, not afraid to experiment, thinking that this was kind of a courageous decision to try and modify a Fair Isle chart, but I thought now was the time. So in the end, long story short, what I decided to do was I borrowed that same pattern here in the green. Oh, yeah, I borrowed that green pattern and repeated it exactly as is over here. I did 1 round of pink, and then I actually borrowed a motif from the burra cowl, which is, I'll show a photo, this little diamond thing that splits it into 2 different colors. And I chose colors that hadn't been used in a bit and that had enough contrast, and I think it looks okay. Right now when I'm looking at it, I feel like it stands out, the shape of it maybe, but that could just be because I'm looking too close to it. And once I start doing my second repeat, I hope that it will melt a little better into it. I hope this makes sense and that you could see things from there. But all that to say that this is my way of getting the length and the width that I want. The yarn is amazing. I've talked about this before. It's one of my favorite yarns ever. And right now it doesn't look amazing or the best. It's a bit gappy, a little see-through, there's some inconsistencies, but I know that this will block out 200%. It will be super great when I block it, and it will become really plush and thick and squishy and softer. I'm really, really looking forward to that step. In fact, I was almost tempted to block it halfway through just to experience that joy, but I'm technically 50% done already. Usually I will run out of steam when I finish a whole repeat, because you don't get that joy of like, what's the next motif? Here, this is everything I have. Like, I know what's coming. But yeah. The original was made in Rowan felted tweed, but I used someone's Ravelry palette that used Shetland Spindrift. So actually, yeah, I said earlier I was using the original colors. I wasn't. I just copied someone's palette. And I like it. The other modification that I did actually was that for this motif here, you can see in the middle with the dark blue, there's some pink. The original had beige. No. Grey. But the grey on beige wasn't contrasting enough, and someone else on Ravelry had used that pink color, and I really like that. So I used the pink here, which is a modification. Also, I noticed an error in the chart and emailed Mary Wallen, and she replied 12 hours later saying, "You're right, it is a mistake, it should be this round." And then she shared a new PDF with the corrected round. So the way I noticed it was wrong was because it was part of something that was mirrored. So obviously, because I had done the bottom section, when I reached the top section, I was like, wait a minute, that's not going to be symmetrical on that mirror line. So I was asking Mary Wallen, am I supposed to keep the bottom one and mirror that, or keep the top one and mirror it to the bottom? Because one of them was right and one of them was wrong, and in the end the bottom one was right, so the top one should have been changed. And I put all of that on Ravelry if you're ever interested in making that pattern, which I would recommend. But definitely be aware of the circumference of the finished item if you make it as is, and what you'd prefer for your own neck. And the last thing about this pattern is the beginning of the round. It's not looking too bad right now. The way I am doing this time, I'm again trying to take it more seriously, trying to not dread having a million ends to weave in. I'm doing spit splicing, and I asked for tips in a previous video and you guys helped me look out some resources. I am better at it now. I put more liquid on it, more spit. I felt it for longer, and it's been paying off. I've been trying to do that a lot, and then if a color is going to be repeated quite soon after, I carry it up. So I really don't have that many ends to weave in. I actually think now would be a good time for me to go and weave them, but I'll probably take a photo of it inside out and insert this here so you can see what my ends look like, and this is with me not doing anything at all in terms of weaving or whatever. So that has been more effortful. Like, the beginning of a round takes me longer because I've got to worry about spit splicing or carrying the yarn up or catching floats and things. But I think this will really pay off in the long term, because then it's less ends to weave in. And also what I'm worried about with color work is when you're joining a new color, you're risking having a gap between two stitches or a hole. And if you're not weaving your ends correctly, which sometimes I'm not, then you're not filling that gap, and so you can still see the hole after. And so this is my paranoia when I would be making the Yale cardigan or garments in Fair Isle with so many ends to weave in. I'd be worried about having a huge long line of mess. But this technique has been working for me, the spit splicing and carrying the yarns up, so I'm happy to have gained a skill, and I can take that forward in a garment, which is the point of making those accessories for me, and also because I love them, and they look really beautiful and almost machine made, like printed on. And the last thing to mention about this project is that this will actually be an entry into the like a farm show that's happening in Edinburgh in June. I entered it last year with a crochet item. This year I'm entering it again. The theme is a autumn walk, and I think that, I don't know, it's subjective, isn't it? But I think that this will work fine. Autumn, or like, yeah, I think it's autumn walk, and it's a neck warmer is the category. So I'll be entering this in the show. I'll definitely be finished on time, and probably not wear it that much because it'll be summer anyway, because I want to keep it nice and perfect for the show. And these people will really judge your knitting critically, which is also why I'm trying to have my ends and my beginning of round to be as neat as possible. I hope that they won't necessarily notice that I added a new pattern repeat, or at least I'm happy that everything will be mirrored, because that might be what the judges look into. In terms of the color, I think I prefer my Burra cowl. It's definitely more muted, this one. But yeah, look at me. I'm a colourwork queen. No, I can't say that. Yeah, they're very different. Even though they have a few colours that are used in both, like the orange, the red, the yellow, the purple, and the beige, and the grey. So there's a lot of colours that are the same. But yeah, and this is blocked and this is unblocked, so you can see the difference in like how smooth this is and how puckered this is. I think that's it for that. I hope that was interesting, even if you don't do color work. I don't know how in-depth that was and if it was maybe too much. Okay, next item is also from Sari Nordland's new book, Softly Timeless Knits, and it is a pair of socks. I don't know how to pronounce this, Thelxino socks. I'm actually using a new to me sock yarn, which is Socks Yeah by Co-op Knits DK. And the reason I'm making those socks is, again, kind of an impulsive cast on, where one of my goals this year was to enter that farm show or craft show in Edinburgh in June, and one of the other categories is some boot socks, so in DK. So I'm making these as well for the yarn show, and it will be my entry. So I had some yarn in stash that was a DK sock yarn, but the color was grey and navy, and the theme was autumn walk. So I picked this color from Socks Yeah, and it's Moselle, I think, or Morel, Moselle, I think, and it's a really nice muted red, pink. It reminded me of autumn leaves. And I bought 3 balls of it on sale at Wool Warehouse. Good deal. Not too pricey, and I must say I am incredibly impressed. As much as I was a little disappointed with this sock yarn, I am thrilled with that one. So it is affordable, which is relative. It is super soft. It's round, plump, enjoyable to knit with. The stitch definition is perfect, cable definition is perfect, and they have a nice selection of colors. So I started a whole sock, which is here, and then I ran out of my first ball of yarn. So I put this on hold, and then I started the second sock. Obviously this means nothing to you. So I started the second sock, and so I've been doing them in tandem. So I've now used 2 balls of yarn, and I've got my third one here that I will then finish the foot and the toe. And I'm really, really pleased with this. Usually I don't do that because I don't like cutting into my yarn. So if I have a 100-gram sock yarn ball, I don't want to do a bit of one, do a bit of the other. I could work from both ends of the yarn, or I could split the yarn first, but what if I accidentally do 40%, 60%? You know, I just don't like to do that. But I really like the fact that 2 socks are more than halfway done. It went really fast. It starts off with a tubular cast on, which is really well explained, and a nice detail that I think is worth the extra effort. Then there's some 2x2 rib for a while. Then you've got the cable chart that at first wasn't easily memorizable, and I had to keep looking back on the chart. But in the end it did sink in a little bit. And you're doing that chart on both sides of the leg. I'm trying to stretch it, but you're probably not going to be able to see like that well. I might try and put a photo, maybe put it on the sock blocker, but you can see there's cables quite a lot and they're quite intertwined. Then you do a normal slip stitch heel flap and gusset, and then you continue with the cable pattern on the top of the foot, and then you just do a wedge toe. So it's very straightforward sock construction, and the cables are a little bit more tricky than, for example, the Hygge season socks that I have done before. Again, I'm doing this for a competition or a show, so I wanted to do something that maybe showcased my skills a little bit, and it was trickier to do. Yeah, I've not made any mistake. It's been enjoyable, and it's been even more enjoyable when I started to memorize the chart. Pattern is really well written. I don't know if I've already said that. So I've really been enjoying everything about this, except the fact that I'm going to have to weave in more ends because I've got to join this. So yeah, only modification I'm doing is that I'm doing them on a size smaller needle. I think she recommends 3mm. I'm doing 2.75 because that's what worked for me for the Higgins season socks, and these have the same stitch count actually, so I know what my size is. But that's it for these. So I think we've reached the end of all of my active whips. There's actually one more whip, but I think I prefer talking about that in the next episode because there's again not been that much progress since last time. This is my sweater number 23 by My Favorite Things Knitwear. I've actually just recently shared a tutorial on my channel about my crochet slip stitch edge neck, if you're interested in that. But yeah, as you can see, I'm still working on it, but there's not that much to say. This was part of my pomegranate cal knit along that we were hosting on Discord with Ichi, and the winners have been announced. Congratulations to them. I'd highly recommend you join Discord and maybe check out like the gallery of everyone's entries. It was really fantastic. Thank you to everyone who participated. But yeah, I guess I wanted to briefly mention that the knit along is over, and it was really fun. And ever since finishing the neck on this, I've been super eager to finish this, so it will definitely be a finished item in the next episode. A couple more things before we go then. 2 plans for the future. One thing that I've picked up recently, which is also for the Royal Highland Show, craft show in Edinburgh, is another category is a crochet bag for summer theme. And it's something that I started last year in April, I think, so the long-term viewers may remember what I'm about to show. And this is the bottom of a bag. I've just finished this and I've blocked it, so this will be the bottom of the bag, and then I'm going to pick up all around and start building the bag up. And this is very floppy. I will hopefully have some backing and everything and lining in the bag. This is made with Scapier's Whirlet in 4 different colors. This is 60% cotton, 40% acrylic, fingering weight. You get 455 meters in 100 grams. And I'm making this in with a 2.75 crochet hook. It is really tiny. There were a lot of stitches. This was an absolute slog to get through. I did not like that, which is why I gave up halfway through. I think before I was there and now I'm here. And here's what I have so far. It's quite crumpled, but yeah, so this is going to be the bottom of the bag, and it's a nice little backpack. Plodding along nicely making this, but then I think I got distracted by other crochet projects, and then I just got too into my knitting, so I gave up on this crochet, but I obviously finished this. So now the fun part can begin. I will show what the pattern is supposed to look like. It's mosaic crochet knitting, and that particular designer has quite a few fun techniques to make the crochet overlay more fun and more detailed with some curves and everything, so it's not your average mosaic crochet. And I don't know if I'm going to be finishing this in time for the show, so maybe I'll have to find a backup bag, crochet bag, to enter. But ideally I'd like to get some progress on this. It's just, it looks like a beast of a project. But I'm really proud that I finished this. It's been like, that little piece of fabric has been on the go for almost a year, and now the fun can begin. So yeah, that's one thing. And then while we're on the topic of bags, I've cast on something yesterday, which is the Winter Clutch by Petite Knit. Again, this wasn't particularly planned. It was something that was kind of on my radar, I thought, as like a stash buster. But someone gifted me the pattern on Ravelry, and I couldn't resist casting it on. So I've used some yarn I had in stash. I had originally planned to use this for a hat, but I thought it was a little rustic. This is John Arbon... No, it's not. No, it is John Arbon Devonia DK, but it's hand-dyed by Nervous Fiber. I bought this in a sale a while ago in the color Morass, which I actually think was a Advent colorway from like 2 years ago, or like 2 winters ago. And then she did some full skins of it later. So it's really beautiful, very striking. It's a little greener in real life. And I only have 233 meters, and I think the pattern calls for over 250. So we'll see what I get. The original pattern I think is a sport yarn. This is DK, so hopefully this will go taller, easier, and I won't have to use as much yarn to reach the heights that she calls for. But I'll just use it for as long as I have yarn for it. So yeah, at first the goal was to make a hat, but then oh, the sun is... I thought that the hat might be a bit too bright. I'm not as into that color anymore. Like it's really yellow, isn't it? So, and I have a lot of hats. So bag it is. and I'll show you what I have so far. It's a really fun construction, so it's been super enjoyable to work on. It's a small project, you don't have to do that much before you reach the next step. So here's that. And she calls it garter slip stitch pattern. So yeah, not much to report on. I will talk about this more in the next episodes, but I just thought I'd show you that I started a little project. And I'm gonna, yeah, hopefully finish the socks really soon, my sweater number 23 pretty soon, and this will probably not take that long either. So that's it for my future plans. There's not that much else that I'm planning to cast on because I've been trying to be slower and knit less, and I'd really like to keep that kind of like one in, one out policy. I've been enjoying making smaller items, I've been enjoying making like bags and accessories. Doing the fair isle is time consuming, doing the cables is time consuming, so that's been really enjoyable. I've not been purchasing much, so acquisition section, I have one thing that I'd like to show you. Actually I've got two, so there's one yarn acquisition and then something else. So Skein and the Stitch, you might have heard of them. They were doing a book club, like book yarn month thing, where every month then, and they announced what the 6 months were. They said what the book was going to be, and then you were going to get a mystery skein of yarn. The first book was going to be The Iliad by Omer, and I really, my boyfriend has really been into the Iliad and the Odyssey. He's been reading them, and like this year, and he's been talking about them. He's really passionate about it, and it's been kind of like an inside joke, and it's been really fun talking about the Iliad all months long. So when Skein and the Stitch announced she was doing a mystery yarn, I was really hesitant to buy it. I didn't want to just, you know, keep on buying things, fear of missing out. Mystery skeins, like what if I didn't like it? It looked like it was going to be maybe heavy on the like warm tones, like gold and yellow and beige, I don't know. So I wasn't sure from like the mood board. And then afterwards I was kind of regretting it, thinking it would have been fun, maybe I should have bought it. And then recently she did a in-shop update, and there was also a newsletter discount, and then there it was. So I was like, okay, great, now that I've actually had time to think about it. And also she did a colorway reveal, so I knew what it was going to look like, and it looked really good. And then there was a discount, so I bought it. So here it is, and it's really pretty. So it's really special. It's kind of like a white creamy base with hints of silver, lots of bloody red, a little bit of black for like the mud, I guess, like some speckles, a bit of beige. So maybe I'll do a little video b-roll of it when it's not basked in the sun like this. But yeah, this is a 75% superwash merino, 25% nylon, and I'm really, really happy with it, and having waited for it and knowing that this is what I wanted. I'll probably make a pair of socks with that. I like that she sold a sock set with a yellow, like gold, as an accent contrast color. I didn't buy that. I already have some yellow gold yarn in stash, so if I make a contrasting cuff, heel and toe, I'll do it in that gold that I already have. And I think I'll make a pair of socks. I'll try and keep it to like less than 50 grams, so maybe I'll make 2 pairs, maybe I'll make a pair for my boyfriend and then make a shorty pair for myself, but maybe not because I might get bored of that colorway. But yeah, it's been a while since I've bought hand-dyed, and it's been a while since I've bought one skein of hand-dyed, because usually I go a bit crazy and get like a sweater quantity, but this was just like, just make 1 pair of socks, that's fine. Maybe I'll cast these on when I finish my cabled sari socks. And then the next acquisition that I did was because of a lot of recommendations from people in a past video about what to wear under layers, like what layer to wear under itchy, scratchy sweaters. And a lot of people recommended to get some thermal tops from Uniqlo, for example, or M&S. So M&S is really accessible to me where I live, and my parents were visiting recently, so we went to M&S together, picked up some nice layers, and I got this like navy, I got a beige, I got white, so I'm pleased with that. I'm not wearing one just now because I think I would be overheating. I'm wearing like a tank top, but I've been wearing them around the house, and they're really, really nice, and I can recommend them. If you're looking for layers to put under your sweaters and you live in the UK, go to M&S, pick up some thermal tops. They've got like medium heat one and then like light heat. I get the light heat one because I don't need to be like overheating. So yeah, I guess that leads to my next update, which is that my parents came over. It was really fun. They came for the weekend. We spent some time in Stirling, which is just kind of like a half hour from where I live, and I gifted them a lot of things. So I'll put some photos here. I got the permission from everybody involved. It's been so joyful. So my parents were super grateful. My dad got his Belgian hat. He was wearing it the whole time. Which is funny because at one time they met some French tourists and they were talking, and then the tourists were like, "Oh, are you also from France?" And then my dad was like, "No, look at my hat. We're from Belgium." So he's been really loving it. My mum, I gifted her 3 sweaters, and then she wore them all of the days of her trip. She wore 1 sweater a day, and they suit her so well. It's insane. Like, they were made to fit me, sweater size and arm length, but they suit her so well, and I was really, really pleased with that. And then she also got the gloves, which she was wearing a lot, like the penny gloves, and I gave her the cashmere gloves to give to my aunt. She loves them. And the beanie to give to my grandma, who was very touched and complimenting me on the stitch pattern. She wouldn't have known how to do it herself, even though she's a knitter. I think somebody was saying on YouTube recently that it's nice if you're gifting something to a knitter to do something that maybe like they wouldn't do themselves, like colourworks or cables or something, or like if they don't do socks, make them socks or something. So we had a really fun time. I didn't do a lot of knitting that weekend. I was just so busy, and it was also nice to kind of just like put the knitting down for a while, go outside, visit places, do some reading, spend time with family and loved ones. It's not necessary to knit for like 7 hours a day, which is also maybe why I don't have finished items, like new finished items this episode. But I've really been enjoying myself. I've really been enjoying the knitting. I'm excited for next week's video. I've started planning it. It's going to be all about my top yarns and worst yarns. So I'll talk about like my favorite yarns and why, and then also the yarns that I would never buy again. So yeah, get ready for that. If you have any requests on like what you want me to cover in that type of video, I'm planning to talk about like wearability, like the durability of the yarn and probably why they're my favorite, and then planning to give recommendations and suggestions for substitutions. If my favorite yarn isn't accessible to you, I'll talk about what best resembles that yarn. But let me know if there's anything else you'd like me to cover in that type of video, and I'd be happy to include that. Also, people who participated in the pattern giveaway last episode, thank you so much. The winner has been contacted and selected. So yeah, that's it. Yeah, next week we'll have that video about best and worst yarns. A couple of weeks we'll have a podcast episode, and then we're gonna get into spring planning, I think. Once I finish everything that's on my needles, I think the next thing I might cast on will be a t-shirt. As always, thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, don't hesitate to give it a like. I hope that you got some nice progress done. I'm looking forward to going back to my knitting this afternoon. And yeah, if you're not already, I'd love it if you could subscribe. It always motivates me, and we're like we're kind of getting close to 9,000, and then after that it'll be 10,000, which is really great. And I'm brainstorming some ideas on how to celebrate the big 5-digit number. So if you want to help me reach that, then definitely subscribe. But yeah, it's been a pleasure sitting down and catching up with you guys. I hope that you enjoyed the relaxed vibes of this video. I feel like there will be probably a bit less to edit, and I'll just keep it chill and natural. So yeah, have a good rest of your day or your week. Happy knitting, and see you all next time. Bye!